Overnight, trade talks with Canada are now on ice. President Trump announced he's canceling negotiations with one of America's biggest allies over a Canadian TV ad opposing U.S. tariffs. It features an address by former President Ronald Reagan. The escalation as the president hopes to cool trade tensions further east. Jared Hill has the latest.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports.
An ad from Ontario featuring parts of an address by former U.S. President Ronald Reagan.
America's jobs and growth are at stake.
Has apparently caught the ire of President Donald Trump. In a social media post overnight, Trump called the ad fake, declaring all trade negotiations are hereby terminated, citing a response from the Reagan Foundation claiming the video misrepresents Reagan's words. It's the latest escalation in a rift with Canada amid Trump's trade strategy imposing new tariffs and import limits. Canadian backlash helped clinch an election win for Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Our relationship with the United States will never again be the same as it was.
Today's stalemate with America's neighbor to the north comes as President Trump gears up for tariff talks with the U.S.'s biggest economic rival in the East.
I expect we'll probably work out a very fair deal with President Xi of China.
The two expected to meet at an economic summit in South Korea next week. Earlier this month, the president threatened an additional 100% tariff on Chinese imports. American soybean farmers caught in the middle as China has completely stopped buying from the U.S.
We thought that we would be having some trade tension, but we had no idea it would be this type of trade tension and this type of chaos.
Meanwhile, Canada working to clear the air as Carney sought to negotiate with Trump during a White House visit earlier this month.
Earlier this week, the Canadian Prime Minister said the country would seek to double its exports to countries other than the U.S., citing the, quote, pall of uncertainty caused by American tariffs.
It's a cross-border.
All right, my friends, thank you for being here today. There are a few things we want to talk about today. Definitely have some breaking news we have to get to. I actually saw this ad the other day, and I didn't think too much about it. As a matter of fact, the only thing I did think about it was, wow, this is a pretty good ad. And as it turns out, surprise, surprise, this particular ad has to be called nothing but deception. And of course, President Donald Trump is not too happy about this particular ad. And we're going to take a in-depth look at it today. I actually have the original recording made by President Ronald Reagan back in the 80s. And we're going to review it completely together. So if you're new to the program, welcome. I'm assuming everybody can hear me fine. If you can't, feel free to take time and put it in the comments. If you haven't done so already, please go ahead and introduce yourself and say hello. And we obviously want to say hello to American Anna. And we have Rose Marie joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you in the chat. Thank you, Rose. All right, my friends, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right now. Once again, I am J.R. Dukes. Welcome to the home of the free-minded patriots. This is where the woke choke, the truth prevails, and the battle for your freedoms are fought and won. You can always find me right here on YouTube at JR Dukes or on the X platform, simply reach JR Dukes. So let's go ahead and get into it. Unbelievable what just happened with this particular ad from our supposed friends, aka Canada. All right. President Trump has now cut off, as of today, all trade negotiations with Canada after they, let's just call it, pushed a complete fake and doctored ad. I mean, wait till you see what they published versus the original. It is two complete different meanings, 100%. This was clearly a deliberate, decisive attempt to try to smear President Trump and rewrite history. They took basically a video of former President Ronald Reagan, like I said, all the way back from the 80s, the man who used tariffs himself to defend America against Japan and some of Japan's unfair trading practices back in the 1980s. And they twisted his words to make it look like some kind of, basically to make Ronald Reagan look like a global pacifist of some sort. It's probably the best way to say it. But guess what? That video, that full video, when you look at the entire context, it is very clear because it tells you the truth. Reagan actually said that tariffs are dangerous when misused, but he warned that Congress was, at the time, Congress was trying to take away his power to use tariffs, and his exact comments were that this would be, quote, extremely dangerous, end quote, and it would, of course, hurt America. So that was really what Reagan said. Again, it all has to do with framing and it being taken out of context. Apparently, the government of Canada spent something like $75 million to influence what's going on right here in the States. And when I tell you what they're trying to influence, you're not going to be too happy about it. So the same elites that Reagan fought a long time ago, the same type of people who ship our jobs overseas, they're now pretending to speak for Ronald Reagan. And of course, our great President Trump has called their bluff. He said, I'm not taking it, and you're going to pay the price accordingly. Once again, President Donald Trump is standing up for the American worker and exposing the fake media and foreign manipulators for what they are. They're anti-American. They are definitely not for our best interest. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and start rolling the tape. I got an article for us to look at. We're going to dissect the actual videos. I have the proof to show you, and we're going to talk about why this actually matters, this particular moment. It's very, very important. This is more than trade. This is about truth, the U.S. sovereignty, and leadership, the different leadership, the correct leadership that we are experiencing with President Trump right now. So without further ado, let me go ahead and switch over. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put it in the chat. I'm assuming everybody can hear me. Hello to our friends on Twitch and everyone on the X platform and, of course, YouTube. Thank you all for being here. It is always a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk and share some things that are going on. And, of course, this is an important story, as I was saying, directly from the Gateway Pundit. We're going to take a look at this article quickly, and then I have the actual videos for us to start dissecting. Breaking. Trump terminates all trade negotiations with Canada after government of Ontario fraudulently uses ad campaigns featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. President Trump, late Thursday evening, announced all trade negotiations with Canada have been terminated after the government of Ontario, Canada. He's specifically talking about, I believe his name is Mike Ford, that crazy loon that runs it over there. I mean, if you remember back years ago, I think this was the same guy that got caught up in that crack fiasco that was going on. It's I don't want to get in, go down that particular road pertaining to him. This guy has a long sordid history, and we'll just let it go at that for this particular moment. At any rate, they created an ad campaign using selective audio of President Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs. Trump accused the government of Ontario of interfering with the Supreme Court's decision on his tariffs. Bingo, bingo. There is a very important case coming up before the Supreme Court. I believe it's this November 5th of this year, and they're going to be taking up the issue as to whether or not President Trump has the authority that he's been acting with to basically impose tariffs up or down or whichever he decides to do. The High Court is set to hear oral arguments, boom, November 5th on Trump's tariffs after a lower court ruled they were illegal. The Ronald Reagan Foundation has just announced that Canada has fraudulently used an advertisement which is fake featuring Ronald Reagan speaking negatively about tariffs, Donald Trump said. Now, just for clarification, the Ronald Reagan Foundation is essentially the same people that are running the Reagan Library on YouTube. They do have their own site, and they continuously post different videos of former President Ronald Reagan. The ad was for $750 million. This is a $750 million campaign that they have spent money to try to lie to the American people and to influence public opinion and the opinion of the Supreme Court. They only did this to interfere with the decision of the U.S. Supreme Court and other courts, President Trump said on Truth Social. He goes on, tariffs are very important to national security and economy of the USA based on their egregious behavior. All trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Thank you for attention to this matter, President DJT. I have the actual post, as you can see right here. We're going to take a look at it on the Truth site itself in 1 second. And we also have the actual commercial that we're going to review together that's also posted on the X platform. The Ronald Reagan Foundation on Thursday evening responded to the government of Ontario's advertisement. We have the actual post that the Foundation made, and we will talk about that in detail in just 1 second. The ad misrepresents the president's radio address, and the government of Ontario did not seek nor receive permission to use and edit the remarks, they said. Apparently, they're going to claim some type of copyright. We'll have to see if that ends up in court by itself. Stay tuned on that, right? The Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute is reviewing its legal options in this matter. That's code for get ready. You're going to have to pay accordingly. Here is the post by President Donald Trump. Not going to reread the whole thing. We pretty well just went over it. But he did say all trade negotiations with Canada are hereby terminated. Now, here is the official statement, and I blew it up for you right here from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation Institute. Learned of the government of Ontario, Canada, creating an ad campaign using selective audio and video of President Ronald Reagan delivering his, quote, radio address to the nation on free and fair trade dated April 25th, 1987. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I did go back and actually pull this video. It's not very long, but we are going to take a look at it together during this program because it's just stunning, absolutely stunning how they can so blatantly lie. In legal terms, this is what you call a false light. They just took selective clips and kind of made it say, if you will, what they wanted it to say, which of course is that tariffs are terrible for Americans and we should all bring pressure to bear on whomever to make sure these tariffs go away, which is extremely unfortunate that they would try that against our people right here. It's really aggravating when you think about it. The ad misrepresents the presidential radio address, and the government of Ontario did not seek or receive permission to use the edited remark. And then it goes into their legal threat, and it says, we encourage you to watch President Reagan's unedited video on our YouTube channel. And of course, I took time to actually pull the ad that you can see right there, but I want you to go ahead and let's take a look at the actual commercial together first, and then let's compare it to what President Reagan actually said way back in 1987. So let's go ahead and get into it right now. It's only about a minute long, so it's not a long commercial. Here we go.
When someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. But over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
I have to admit, when I saw this yesterday, I thought it was I think it was yesterday, the day before yesterday. I remember seeing it. I think I was watching Fox News or one of the news channels, and that particular video came up, and I was thinking to myself, wow, I did not realize myself that Ronald Reagan was so opposed to imposing tariffs on countries. I found that to be a little shocking. I just didn't remember that particular clip. So it was effective as far as, in my mind, I thought, wow, that's interesting. It's put together pretty nicely. Obviously, it's a professional clip. But listen, I want you to understand the reason why this particular moment matters because it exposes just how far political actors and foreign interests, it's not just here in our country. We're talking about other foreign countries, in this case, Canada. They're willing to go to distort history and manipulate public perception. The doctored video that we just watched, this Reagan ad, wasn't just a harmless political jab. It was a calculated attempt to rewrite Ronald Reagan's legacy. And, of course, to attack President Trump's America First agenda. And, of course, as we said earlier, to attack the Supreme Court in a way by influencing the upcoming court case that they're going to be facing. By cutting off, as President Trump did, the negotiations with Canada, President Trump is sending a clear and decisive message. America will not tolerate this type of deceit. We will not tolerate foreign interference. We will not put up with fake narratives designed to weaken our position on the world stage. Again, this is not about tariffs alone, ladies and gentlemen. This is about truth, sovereignty, and defending the integrity of America and defending our leadership and making sure that it's clear to the world that we will not tolerate this type of conduct, this type of misinformation, period. Full stop. So let's go ahead and let's visit our friend Ronald Reagan from a long time ago. And let's take a look at this video together. It's not very long. I think the whole video is about 5 minutes, but there's a little bit of nonsense here at the beginning. But let's go ahead and start. And I want to give you a quick clue. Listen to the beginning of it and the end of it. What is going on, just to give you a little bit of history here. Ronald Reagan just got done imposing tariffs himself. Yes, he was using tariffs himself against Japan. And I believe it had to do with semiconductors at the time, all the way back in 1987. So you had Ronald Reagan using the tariffs. At the same time, he was sending a message, hey, I don't like these tariffs. They generally are not a good thing. And I'm using these tariffs with great caution. I have no choice because of what Japan is doing to the United States of America at that particular time. And in his closing remark, you're going to hear him speak out because the Congress at that time, the Democrats, were going after President Reagan, trying to take away his ability to issue tariffs. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it should, ladies and gentlemen, because that's going on right now today in our country. You have these woke, crazy liberal Democrats. They're actively working, trying to take away the president's ability to issue these tariffs. And of course, the Supreme Court hopefully will make the right decision coming up here very quickly. So without further ado, let's take a look at this together and we will talk about it.
My fellow Americans, Prime Minister Nakasone of Japan will be visiting me here at the White House next week. It's an important visit because while I expect to take up our relations with our good friend Japan, which overall remain excellent, recent disagreements between our two countries on the issue of trade will also be high on our agenda. As perhaps you've heard, last week I placed new duties on some Japanese products in response to Japan's inability to enforce their trade agreement with us on electronic devices called semiconductors. Now, imposing such tariffs or trade barriers and restrictions of any kind are steps that I am loath to take. And in a moment, I'll mention the sound economic reasons for this, that over the long run, such trade barriers hurt every American worker and consumer. But the Japanese semiconductors were a special case. We had clear...
He's talking about the semiconductors, like we just mentioned before. It was important at the time. Of course, technology changes as time goes on, but we still use some of the same technology. But it was a big deal then, and tariffs, of course, are a big deal now. Quick programming note: you're welcome to disagree with my opinion. You're welcome to disagree with others, but we have to be respectful and polite. If anyone does not adhere to those rules, or if they get carried away, you're going to be blocked, put in a timeout, whatever. Please just have an intelligent debate. You don't have to agree with everything I say necessarily. It's not required at all, but we need to have a calm, intelligent discussion of what's going on here. Otherwise, you can't participate, unfortunately, just the way it is. So keep it PG if you would. And without further ado,
evidence that Japanese companies were engaging in unfair trade practices that violated an agreement between Japan and the United States. We expect our trading partners to live up to their agreements. As I've often said, our commitment to free trade is also a commitment to fair trade. But you know, in imposing these tariffs, we were just trying to deal with a particular problem, not begin a trade war. So next week, I'll be giving Prime Minister Nakasone this same message. We want to continue to work cooperatively on trade problems.
Okay, I want to make sure no one miss this before he gets into some of the stuff that you heard in the doctored commercial. He's about to meet with some representative from Japan. Ronald Reagan went ahead and issued a tariff against the country of Japan because of unfair trading practices in a nutshell. He's also going to say that, hey, I am not happy that I have to do this, but I got to do what I got to do, very similar to what President Trump is doing right now.
And want very much to lift these trade restrictions as soon as evidence permits. We want to do this because we feel both Japan and the United States have an obligation to promote the prosperity and economic development that only free trade can bring. Now, that message of free trade is one I conveyed to Canada's leaders a few weeks ago, and it was warmly received there. Indeed, throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. Now, there are sound historical reasons for this. For those of us who lived through the Great Depression, the memory of the suffering it caused is deep and searing. And today, many economic analysts and historians argue that high tariff legislation passed back in that period, called the Smoot-Hawley Tariff, greatly deepened the Depression and prevented economic recovery. You see, at first, when someone says, let's impose tariffs on foreign imports, it looks like they're doing the patriotic thing by protecting American products and jobs. And sometimes for a short while it works, but only for a short time. What eventually occurs is, first, homegrown industries start relying on government protection in the form of high tariffs. They stop competing and stop making the innovative management and technological changes they need to succeed in world markets. And then, while all this is going on, something even worse occurs. High tariffs inevitably lead to retaliation by foreign countries and the triggering of fierce trade wars. The result is more and more tariffs, higher and higher trade barriers, and less competition. So soon, because of the prices made artificially high by tariffs that subsidize inefficiency and poor management, people stop buying. Then the worst happens. Markets shrink and collapse, businesses and industries shut down, and millions of people lose their jobs. The memory of all this occurring back in the 30s made me determined when I came to Washington to spare the American people the protectionist legislation that destroys prosperity. Now, it hasn't always been easy. There are those in the Congress, just as there were back in the 30s, who want to go for the quick political advantage, who risk America's prosperity.
So now, you heard through the body of the comments from President Ronald Reagan, you heard some of the similar themes in that fake commercial, but they edited out the beginning. And as we wind this commercial down here, I should say this quick comments by President Reagan, you're going to see some very important things that he left out. And what he's talking about right now is Congress at that particular moment in time, like they are today, was targeting President Reagan, trying to take away his ability to issue these tariffs. Amazing, eh?
For the sake of a short-term appeal to some special interest group who forget that more than 5 million American jobs are directly tied to the foreign export business, and additional millions are tied to imports. Well, I've never forgotten those jobs, and on trade issues, by and large, we've done well. In certain select cases, like the Japanese semiconductors, we've taken steps to stop unfair practices against American products, but we've still maintained our basic long-term commitment to free trade and economic growth. So, with my meeting with Prime Minister Nakasone and the Venice Economic Summit coming up, it's terribly important not to restrict a president's options in such trade dealings with foreign governments.
Did you hear that? It's important not to restrict the ability of the president to deal with the foreign governments in relation to tariffs. Completely different message than what Canada put to the American public.
Unfortunately, some in the Congress are trying to do exactly that. I'll keep you informed on this dangerous legislation because it's just another form of protectionism, and I may need your help to stop it. Remember, America's jobs and growth are at stake. Until next week, thanks for listening, and God bless you.
Isn't that interesting, right? Complete different ad than what they put out to the American populace in general. And it's a foreign government. This should outrage each and every one of us. And I'm personally outraged about it. This is extremely, extremely aggravating. And it's unfortunate. Canada is supposed to be our long-term friends. And I just don't see how a friend does something like that. Look, everybody knows President Trump and they know his personality type. They should have known he was going to react like this. And frankly, my friends, I don't blame him for reacting in this particular matter. I mean, what do you guys think? You agree or disagree with me? Please make sure you make a comment and let me know one way or the other. I am interested in the way that you see this. So clearly, Ronald Reagan used tariffs Obviously, he didn't want to use them as much as Donald Trump maybe uses them right now. But I have to also say we probably weren't being taken advantage of back in the 1980s the way we've been taken advantage of over the years since then. So it's highly probable and possible that Ronald Reagan would have been doing exactly what President Trump is doing had he been president in 2025. Interesting how he did not put that in the ad that Canada spent for $75 million right here in America. So as we're winding this down here, remember, my Patriot friends, this was not about an ad. This was a coordinated attempt to influence the American people, to influence people dealing with President Trump, to influence our Supreme Court. And right before here's a case that could decide whether or not the president of the United States, or any president going forward in history, whether or not he's able to keep power to impose tariffs to protect American jobs. You heard Ronald Reagan say pretty well the same thing. President Trump sees this for what it is: foreign manipulation wrapped in nostalgia. It was sold to us as Reagan's wisdom, but Reagan stood for American strength, not surrender. And just like Reagan, President Trump is not going to back down. The message today is simple. You cannot gaslight history. You cannot lie to America. You cannot bully America. You cannot lie to our people, not with fake ads, not with foreign pressure, and not with courtroom games. The truth always wins. As the Bible says, my friends, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And that's what we hopefully just did on this program today in this breaking news segment that I have for you. President Trump once again has proved that leadership means standing firm, even when the world tries to distort and twist the story. Because at the end of the day, as I said before, it's not about trade. It's about defending America and America's future. And amen to that. I like to always say, my friends, keep that mind free. Never give up. Until next time, I am J.R. Dukes.